Let's review how to write a conclusion statement for a literary analysis. First, let's discuss the difference between a conclusion paragraph and a concluding statement. A concluding statement is usually one, but possibly two sentences that wrap up a single paragraph. They also restate the thesis and kind of sum up what we were recently saying in the paragraph, and they usually use a transition word or phrase. And this is the one that you're going to be using today for the literary analysis. A conclusion paragraph is used for longer essays with multiple paragraphs, such as the 5-paragraph essay. They also restate the thesis or controlling idea and wrap up the essay, just like the concluding statement. But they also explain why this is important, why your position or your thesis is important, and also connect it to real life. The important thing to remember about a conclusion statement or a concluding statement is that it should restate your thesis or controlling idea, wrap up what you're trying to say, and also usually start with a transitional word or phrase. One thing that a concluding statement should not have is any new information. You don't want to introduce any new concepts, support, or ideas that you haven't already discussed in the body of your paragraph. Let's look again at the example on page 78 of our text. First, I'm going to read the concluding statement. Then I'm going to ask myself, does it restate the thesis or controlling idea? Does it start with a transition? And does it sum up the writer's reasons? Let's read the conclusion statement for this paragraph. For these reasons, Carol is a selfish character who is a major cause of Louisa's problems. Let's go back and see if it restates our thesis statement, also called our controlling idea. In our introduction, we can see our thesis statement or controlling idea. In the short story, Louisa, Please Come Home by Shirley Jackson, the least likable character is Louisa's sister, Carol. Although the author doesn't exactly say the same thing as in the introduction, she does restate in different words what she was saying in her thesis or controlling statement. Carol is a selfish character is very similar to she is the least likable character. They both are connected, so they work interchangeably. And she gives a little bit more information at the bottom during the conclusion by saying she's also a major cause of Louisa's problems. So this works. Our thesis statement is restated. Now let's check. Does it start with a transition? For these reasons, Carol is a selfish character who is a major cause of Louisa's problems. In this instance, for these reasons is counting as our transitional phrase. You can tell because it's kind of linking the previous statement to kind of wrapping it up to our conclusion statement. It also is followed by a comma, which is common with transitions. Two other common transition words for using during a conclusion statement is to sum up or in conclusion, and you can use those as well. The third one you want to ask is, does it sum up the writer's reasons? And in this case, it doesn't necessarily go back and restate those reasons, but it does sum up what they were trying to say in the paragraph by saying, for these reasons, and connecting it back to the beginning of the paragraph where it has all of the information and details from the text, and it kind of sums it up by saying, that's why she is a selfish character. Now let's look at our second example, Lost in Time. In this example, the conclusion is more like a short paragraph that has two complete sentences. So let's take a look. For these reasons, the time period in which Louisa lived helped her stage a successful disappearance. She was able to remain anonymous and begin a new life in a city close to home. Now let's read the introduction to see if the thesis statement is restated in the conclusion. So here's the introduction. Shirley Jackson's short story, Louisa, Please Come Home, describes the experiences of a girl who runs away from home. Because the story is set in the 1950s, Louisa has a much easier time disappearing than she would today. In the introduction, the author says that Louisa has a much easier time disappearing in the 1950s than she would today. And similarly, in the conclusion statement, it says she was able to remain anonymous and begin a new life in a city close to home, which has to do with the fact that her time period in which Louisa lived helped her stage the successful disappearance. So although these are in very different words, they both connect to one another. They are both telling us that because of the time in which she lived, the 1950s, she had a much easier time getting away with running away from home and staying hidden. This author used the transition for these reasons as well. Notice how the author doesn't introduce any new information. She's not telling me that there's another reason why it would be harder to disappear today. She's ending it and she's kind of recapping her points. For these reasons, for the things that she already described, using textual evidence, this is why it supports that Louisa had an easier time disappearing in the 1950s. Now I want you to check your own draft. Does your conclusion begin with a transition, such as for these reasons, in conclusion, or to sum up? Does it restate your controlling idea or thesis statement? So you should go back to your introduction sentence and put the controlling idea into different words. This shouldn't be a word-for-word restating like we do when we answer a question or prompt. You need to change things around a bit so that they are similar and connected, but not necessarily in the same words. Finally, does it sum up your analysis? You need to wrap up or close the paragraph up so your reader knows that you're finished and you're not going to give any new information. Do you have a conclusion? Some of you may have forgotten or left off the conclusion. Maybe you give new information or it just ends abruptly and we're not really sure where the rest of it is going or if you're going to give us more information. So if that's the case, go back and see if you can add a strong conclusion that has the restating, summing up, and using of transitional words. Great job.